This is the Best Health Podcast, brought to you by Wake Forest Baptist Health in partnership with MedCost.
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the latest Best Health Podcast, brought to you by Wake Forest Baptist Health. Appreciate everyone joining in and listening to this episode. Hopefully, if you listen to more than one episode, if not, you can check out our Best Health Podcast on a wide variety of topics at wakehealth.edu/besthealth. And you'll find other wellness information on the website as well. So I hope that everyone listening can take advantage of those tools on our website for you guys. So we have been talking the last several podcasts about various topics around COVID-19 and coronavirus and all the direct and indirect topics that come out of this pandemic and us forging through the pandemic. And excited to have a guest with us today. Miss Hayden Morrison is joining us, and she's going to be talking about work-life balance, which, you know, I could listen to a podcast or read a book for hours about this. Maybe some of you guys out there listening could take advantage of this information as well. So Hayden, welcome to the Best Health Podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to dive into some work-life balance discussions here in a minute. Before we do, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do here day in and day out at Wake Forest Baptist.
Sure. So my name's Hayden Morrison, and I am a new family nurse practitioner at Wake Health Summerfield, so in the Greensboro area. I just graduated from Duke in the fall of 2019, and I am still actually at Duke pursuing my doctorate of nursing practice. So okay. I'm still tied into school and fully understand the work-life balance in more ways than one. I do have a specialty in endocrinology. Despite working in family practice, we see a lot of endocrinology complaints, so I found that to be a passion of mine and something that I really enjoy doing in family practice. I also like to see pediatric patients, so that's something that I'm bringing to the table at Wake Health Summerfield, trying to broaden our horizons a little bit and get back to a true family practice setting. I'm married, and I have a dog. I have an Australian Shepherd. His name is Forrest, after the Great Wake Forest. My husband is a diehard Demon Deacon fan.
Nice.
So I fit right in at Wake, even though I'm new here. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to join the family and the organization.
Yes, hopefully we can convert you over from that Duke blue to the black and gold here.
Well, you know, even more troublesome is that I did my undergrad at UNC, so
oh my goodness,
I've got all sorts of blues going on.
Yeah, you have close to the whole Tobacco Road.
That's right.
Trilogy going there. Well, cool. Well, thanks for taking the time. I know, you know, a lot of you guys have been busy, so I appreciate you joining us for today and talking about something that is, you know, it's funny. I think of it as kind of this big overarching topic, like it's kind of a mega topic in our lives, right? This work-life balance. We hear it thrown around a lot. You know, maybe we see it on social media, or it's talked about, you know, once a year in you know, maybe some training that we're a part of or we go to. So it's this kind of this thing that's always out there, but it's funny when you're in like your day-to-day lives running and going, like it's hard to keep that on the front of your mind, on the front burner sometimes. And maybe I'm speaking from personal experience. I don't know, maybe some other people can relate to that, but I guess if you wouldn't mind talking, you know, in your learning and your experience with this, it'd be just interesting to start off with what your thoughts are on, you know, this idea of work-life balance pre-COVID, and then as our work and our lives have been changed significantly for many of us during COVID-19, maybe talk about, you know, compare and contrast briefly this work-life balance, and then we can get into more specifics.
Absolutely. So I think that work-life balance is something that people struggle with at baseline, even in the best of scenarios, not to mention the global pandemic that we're dealing with and all the additional stress. As a healthcare provider, I preach this to a lot of people all the time, even down to adequate sleep and what sleep hygiene is and how to eliminate stress and little things they can do throughout the day. And then as in the same role, I'm that person who doesn't do a lot of the things that we preach day in and day out. Like you mentioned, we forget in the moment what we tell other people to do. And I think that's true for a variety of health issues. And I think work-life balance is so important because in this time right now, we are largely allowed to focus on our work if we are still working, because there's not a lot of other things to do. And not everybody's hobbies involve staying in the house. And if they do, then fantastic, they can do those. But I do think that the lines are blurred a little bit more. We're, not working from home because we're seeing patients, but a lot of our patients are working from home. And as somebody who largely did my graduate education online, I completely empathize with the difficulty to separate yourself and your home environment from that work mode to your daily life. And I think those blurred lines can happen no matter the circumstances for some people. During coronavirus, particularly, a lot of people are being asked to work at home or at least spend part of their week at home. And I think that there are difficulties along with that, because a lot of people have their kids at home. They're trying to play mom, but also teacher. They're trying to stay ahead in their work because they're at risk of being cut. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. And I think a lot of people are feeling pressure from that, which just tops off the inability to actually balance things you still enjoy.
Yeah. Well, that's a great kind of introduction. And I think a lot of what you talked about, many of us can relate to a portion of that for sure. It's interesting when you first maybe hear about, not having to go into the office, or you get to work remotely from home. Some people are like, well, that's awesome. Like I can, work, I can work in my gym shorts and my hoodie from the house, and I can get more stuff done and be more productive. But then once you kind of get it, the devil's in the details a little bit, especially with, what you said with e-learning and virtual learning for children thrown in the mix. So you have this working from home, you have this learning from home happening. And the lines that were maybe more clear prior to COVID are less clear now. So maybe it might have been, in retrospect, easier for some of us to kind of shut off school and then shut off work when we leave that physical place. But now it's all happening in one place, your home. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that, of what, as the lines get blurred, what's the difficulty of that, or the risk of that, and not being able to necessarily shut off work or shut off school at any specific time.
Well, I know I can speak from my experience during the last few months being a new healthcare provider here. I don't have a lot of basis in the past of what we were largely seeing population-wise, but I can say with certainty that I have seen significant increases in anxiety and depression for a lot of my patients. Some of that I feel strongly relates to, just the fear associated with the pandemic, but also the isolation that they're experiencing, particularly if you're a person who lives by themselves. And even people who worked at home prior, because we do have a large population who do some sort of telework. But now we're being told that we can't go and do things that normally you would take a break and get out of the house and do. So I think that there's a lot of risk around the isolation and the anxiety and the pressure associated with being on your game all the time with work. And like we mentioned before, people are worried about losing their jobs. So they are trying to take the opportunity that they now have to put in a little extra work, which there's nothing wrong with working hard. But we do require a mental break. And, we weren't meant to work 24 hours of the day. Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people are doing that. I think somewhere I read that there was an average of an additional 3 hours of work a day, which if you think about it makes sense because people probably are working straight through their lunch that they would normally take. Maybe they're getting up earlier, maybe they're staying up later. And you're right, it's not as easy to just shut off the computer and walk out of the office. But I do think there are some things that can help that. I think having a routine is really important.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So I mentioned earlier, it's this big kind of nebulous topic, right? Work-life balance.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean? Like, how do I keep it on the forefront of my mind? Like, what are some practical things that I could actually do day to day to help me stay focused and maybe be cognizant of this idea of work-life balance?
Absolutely. I think routine is so important because we, in our normal day-to-day lives, lead some sort of routine, even if it seems chaotic, it's still routine. I think, like you mentioned, we do love the idea as a community of just relaxing at home and having the freedom to kind of work where we want and wear what we want, and just accomplish our tasks as the days go forward. But that can get a little messy, especially when the pressure is on. So I think having a defined work area in your home can be really helpful. Some people already have that, but a lot of people don't. If you've never worked from home or gone to school online, or you don't have kids that are at home, you may not have that designated area. So even if that's the kitchen table and you never eat dinner at the kitchen table, so you might as well make use of it. Having just that defined area when you're going to work, this is where you sit. And then when you step away from there, mentally, you're no longer working. And I think even putting a little effort into your appearance, I mean, I would still wear probably very comfortable clothes if I was at home, but if I'm being honest, but I think putting a little effort into your appearance and your clothing can make you feel a lot better. And more focused. I also think having some sort of a schedule is helpful. I know from past experience, I'm kind of the person who, when I would try to do schoolwork at home, I would be like, oh, the floor is dirty. I should go clean the floor. The laundry needs to be done. Let me try to multitask. And for people who love to multitask, that can be really distracting. And then your work's sloppy, then you have more pressure and it just kind of spirals. So making set times, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm going to do these tasks, and then allow yourself a break to do other things that you want to get done at home, because home life doesn't end. And there's no secret about that.
Yeah. So true. So true. And, it's interesting. I wonder if you could maybe speak to this a little bit. It's being in the 21st century and obviously electronic devices are prevalent in many households, which, they're good tools, but they can also serve as like an additional tool to distraction, or it helps blur the lines because you can always, I can check my email at midnight if I wanted to. So, have you talked to some of your patients, or in some of your research and learning about really, kind of separating, unplugging, if you will, from the devices?
So I know that personally I struggle with this some too, because I have the Epic app on my phone, and often I find myself tempted to look at my results from the day that night when I'm at home, when it can really just wait till the morning. But I think I can relate a lot to my patients who struggle with that. But yeah, email is so readily accessible, and it's such a major source of communication that we use in the workforce, that I think that's 100% a huge risk for this additional stress. I really preach a lot of the sleep hygiene habits, and a lot of that goes hand in hand with the putting down the technology. I wouldn't say that I practice that myself 100%, but it's a good thought. But I mean, in a lot of sleep hygiene practices, they recommend at least 2 hours of no screen time before bed. So if you can encourage your patients to do that, you're by default separating to some degree for at least those 2 hours to allow them to have a little downtime. And if they're not sleeping well, that can be a major improvement for them. But the world of technology as we know it is just so in your face, and it's our lifeline, we feel like. So that is a huge issue, I think, with this work-life balance.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. Whether it be email or social media or different messaging apps, it can definitely, you can lose track of the time.
Yeah. I do think you can set some structure, I mean, if you're motivated enough. And I think it's important as healthcare providers to be aware of the current scenario so that we can help our patients be more aware of their habits, because people just may not be aware of it. They may not be aware that could be contributing to their anxiety, the fact that they're working an extra 3 hours a day that they don't even realize they're working, because they don't really have anything else to do. So, I mean, why not work? So being aware of that and talking with our patients about it and suggesting, set a time for yourself. After 5 p.m., I'm not going to look at my work apps on my phone. And I think even just having that mental place can help you hold yourself somewhat accountable. And at the end of the day, feel probably a lot better and a lot more refreshed to do your work the next day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key is being able to, it has to be sustainable, right? So being refreshed to do your work the next day. If this work-life balance is not balanced, it's off balance, the battery doesn't have time to charge. I'm not talking about your devices. I'm talking about you as a person, right? Eventually the battery is gonna zap out for a little bit, correct?
Right. And I think that email is obviously the largest driver of that in our home lives for across the board of professions and careers. But there's certainly lots of social media, whether you manage the social media for your workplace or you're on your personal social media. It can be really distracting. And I think that can, goes right back to poor sleep. But you mentioned not being able to do your work well the next day. Why are we spending all this time working really hard if we're not even doing our work really well? And I think that's something that isn't pointed out enough when we talk about work-life balance, is that recharging that we need. You need time to fill your cup before you can do your work.
Yeah, and we have two boys here at the house that are doing virtual learning, and we started out with the schedule and we haven't been super strict to it, but we've tried to generally stick to some sort of a schedule where they're mixing in their work, it's work time, and then it's lunch time, and then it's enrichment time, and then free play time. So I like the idea. I think I saw in some of the notes this idea of time blocking and sticking to a schedule, so you don't get lost. So you look up and 3 hours has passed, and you're like, where did the time go?
Yeah, I think in one of the Forbes articles, it refers to it as a time theming, which I thought was a unique way to think about that. And you can really set up, and we thrive on schedules and routines. So it goes right back to that. The kids are used to having classes in the morning, some recess, some lunch. They have their little routine, and it throws you off to now be balancing all of that. So in your mind, being able to say, okay, I'm going to allow myself from 10 to 12 to have lunch and to go outside and take a break or do whatever I need to do inside. And then at 1, I'm going to restart my work. And this is what I'm going to focus on. I think that can be really helpful for all of us, but our patients who are working from home as well.
Yeah, and I think what has emerged, and we've done a few other podcasts on this, is mental health and mental wellness. And I think what you're talking about feeds right into those topics of, it's long term. Are you going to be able to sustain? Are you going to get burned out and it lead to maybe some other health conditions that are not the best for your overall wellness, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's got to be. It's hard because we get so caught up in the moment, but we got to be playing a long game, I guess, to some degree, if you want to use a sports analogy a little bit, of if being able to maintain a balance and turn off and unplug is going to help you in the long term, months, if not years down the road. I'm sure you see that in your clinic where people are coming in and you have to talk to them about burnout or other issues and maybe help them get back on track, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think burnout's going to be one of the biggest outcomes from this poor work-life balance that we're experiencing. And I think you're right. A lot of people initially were thinking, wow, it would be so nice to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
But working from home also comes with blurred lines of your schedule,
Mm-hmm.
working a lot of stress, because it's not that easy to collaborate with your coworkers via virtual platforms in the same way that it is being with people. And we're a social community, and for the most part thrive off of relationships with other people. And
Good point.
I think that can be extremely isolating. And I think a lot of, at least the patients that I've been seeing, they feel isolated and trapped, and they're working hard or they can't work at all. And that's been a struggle for them as well. But I think that a lot of our issues just stem right back to that burnout. And I don't think we put enough focus on mental health. I know we've, as a society, started to focus more on it over the past few years, which has been wonderful, but a lot of people struggle with mental health issues at baseline. And now we've just got all sorts of stress on top of it. It's not just the work-life balance. It's people are afraid for themselves. They're afraid for their families. They don't know what's right or wrong, and they're hearing all sorts of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot more to it than just the burnout. But I'm concerned for where we may be in a year with our patients' mental health status if we don't at least put a plug in for them to start focusing on themselves a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's good. And we were speaking with Dr. Scoggin in one of the earlier podcasts, and just the mindfulness and some tools that we can use to be mindful of unplugging and reflecting, and even just deep breathing for a couple of minutes, what that can do to help reset the body.
Absolutely. Like, meditation is so powerful, and that, I know I keep talking about sleep hygiene, but I have a lot of patients who have insomnia or poor sleep hygiene. They don't have a routine. They don't keep, and this is in their normal lives. This isn't just during coronavirus. So, I mean, we're all flawed at doing these things, and we're all flawed at making time for ourselves in our day-to-day lives, let alone now. So, I think that we're already working on something that's broken, but I tell my patients all the time about sleep hygiene, and a lot of times that comes with meditation or deep breathing, like you mentioned. And it's so easy now. Everybody's got an Apple Watch on their arm. There's an app where you can turn a deep breathing on for 60 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
But I think people are struggling with their ability to focus on themselves.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. As we get close to wrapping up this podcast, we've been talking with Hayden Morrison, who's at our Summerfield office over in the Greensboro area about work-life balance, and just encouraging everyone that's listening to make sure that there's the proper amount of life in the work-life balance equation, and remember to take pauses and taking breaks from the work and the e-learning, just to reset during the day a few times, and then being able to unplug is great advice as well, and say, you know what, it's not the end of the world if I get to that tomorrow, right? Tomorrow's another day. And I know I have to remind myself of that sometimes, and I know, maybe some other people do as well. So this has been a great conversation. I appreciate Hayden and appreciate the insight that you've offered.
Yeah, absolutely. I was
any
glad to
closing
hear
thoughts as we wrap up here? Just one last parting nugget of wisdom before we end the podcast.
I think you summarized it pretty well, but I agree with you. I think that work-life balance is important in our everyday lives, and I think that the emphasis now is on working really hard to maintain your value, but your value also lies a lot in your mental health and your physical health and your happiness. So at the end of the day, we do have to pour a little bit into our own cups and find something that can bring us joy every day, especially during these scary times. But I think you summarized it well, and it was great talking with you.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a fun conversation, and hopefully everyone listening maybe can take away a couple of things and put it on a post-it note in front of you while you're working to help you remember, or put it in your phone. And if you find something useful during this podcast episode, please share it with your friends or your family or your coworkers.
Yes.
So Hayden, this has been great, and I want to thank everyone else that's listening for tuning in and taking the time. And until we chat again, please, everyone, be well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Best Health Podcast, brought to you by Wake Forest Baptist Health. For more wellness info, check out wakehealth.edu/besthealth and follow us on social media. Wake Forest Baptist Health. Care for life.